करता. हांव अजय कार्कळांतल्यान. आता नेदरलँड्स आसा आमस्टरडॅमांत कंप्युटर सायन्स PhD करता सर. म्हगेल सानपणांतल्यान म्हगेल एक हॉबी म्हूण येता. I've been reading up a lot on archaeology, genetics, especially around whatever is there out there about the river Sarasvati. So तशी अशी उलयता आसतना सुरज जाणा आनी हांव असले टॉपिक्स येता आसता. आनी it turned out that okay, he wanted me to speak, and it was nice that all of you invited, and we are here today. That is a very short introduction. मागीर कोणाकय इंटरेस्ट आसल्यार म्हाका ईमेल करूं येता, ना म्हण जाल्यार म्हगेलो नंबर आसा ग्रुपान, तूं म्हाका मेसेज करूं येता. विल बी इन इंग्लिश. कसं जाल्यार म्हाका आमची गेल्या ना नॉर्मल उत्तर उलयता जाता, बट एक पाटी once you get into that mode of presentation, that's just a force of habit. I have to do it in English, so please forgive me for that. Okay, so today we'll be talking exclusively about our own ancestry, Sarasvati. There is a larger Indus Valley civilization and the Sindhu-Sarasvati civilization, or the Indian civilization that we know of, that traces everything goes back to the Sarasvati River. But we will not be talking about that. I'll touch upon it a little very briefly in the beginning, but then I'll only exclusively focus on our community. And the one thing that we need to really understand is, when there are bits and pieces in our tradition, in science and in archaeology, what we need to do is we have to make an effort to bring all of these things together. Kanche phatti, ta tradition phatti, ta kani phatti, bapman sangche, ta ship korno, bari science ak matra mi importance diyon mukar samkala samjayna. So we have to build a holistic narrative about where we come from, who we are, and what we are today, using everything. So that's what the focus of this talk that's going to be. So let's begin directly with the Sarasvati River itself. So as I keep saying, Miguel, friends, the history of the Hindu civilization is basically the story of the Indian rivers. Wherever we go, whichever part of the country we go, there is some origin story of the river, some story from the Purana, or something or the other we have. So basically, this is what it is. And India, or Hindu culture, Hindu tradition in general, is a story about deifying everything. And especially Sarasvati, we find that in the Rig Veda, that Sarasvati is the most mentioned river in the Rig Veda. So here I quote something called as the Nadi Sukta, which you find in the Rig Veda in the 10th mandala. And Sarasvati is listed here among Gange, Yamune, Sarasvati. Shutudri is what we know today as Satluj, and other rivers that all the way to the Indus Valley civilization and the Chenab, Bias, Ravi, and all of those rivers that we know. The one thing that we need to understand here is Sarasvati is mentioned along with Yamune. That's the first thing. The second thing is it is the order of these rivers is coming from the east to west. So Gange is the westernmost river that we know, Yamune, Sarasvati, and then it goes on to the western rivers towards the Indus. And this is one distinction. This is something that's important. I'll come to why it is important. Taeka. Other thing is that the Rig Veda devotes, in the Rig Veda, Sarasvati is the only river where you have hymns dedicated only to the river. So you find it repeatedly in the Rig Veda and in the later Vedas, and also in the Mahabharata. So there are they repeatedly mention this river and glorify the strength, glorify it in many different ways. So this is the context with which we will work today. So the Sarasvati River has been mentioned several times, and there's no doubt about it. The question is, where is it today? Because if you look at the map of the Indian subcontinent today, and forgive me for using this map, which doesn't show Jammu and Kashmir as part of India, it is very much part of India. So if you look at the map today, we don't find Sarasvati in the map. Now the question is why, and if we cannot see it today, then is the repeated mention of this river in the Vedas or in the Mahabharata or in the later text or our own heritage, right? Is it a lie? That is the question that we ask. And people have asked this question for generations now. So what you see here on the right is something that I picked up from gsbkerala.com. That's not my source. That is something. It's a nice illustration of what I found. So as I told earlier, we start from the Ganga, we go to Yamuna, and then there is Sarasvati, then there is Satluj. Right? If you look at the map on the left, that is the modern map, you cannot see Sarasvati River today. And in the place of where Sarasvati used to flow, there is a large desert. But the Vedic Sarasvati has been traced to this riverbed that is now defunct, or let's say it's a paleo channel. And it has been identified as the Ghaggar Hakra channel that flows through Haryana even today. It's a seasonal river. And the channel of that river has been identified as the Vedic Sarasvati River. So that's one thing. And now let's move on to, this is the, let's say, the historical aspect. Now this means that the river has disappeared, right? When did the river disappear and how did it disappear? So if you look at the history of India, there is something called as the dark period in the Indian subcontinent. That period is when the Harappan civilization ends and when later, the Mahajanapadas appear. So where, we find mentions of the Kuru kingdom, the Puru kingdoms, and there are these numerous battles of the Mahabharata and all of this. So between that and the end of the Harappan civilization, we call it as the Dark Age. This is the standard accepted model of the Indian history. Everything that comes afterwards is the Maurya kingdom, the Gupta Empire. All of this is later than this. So this dark period is roughly 5,000 years from today, before present. So that's 1900 BCE to somewhere around 1200, 1300 BCE. And this is when the Sarasvati River disappears from the map of India. And several studies, I have not quoted enough here. I've only quoted the most recent ones that you can see in the second. It's from IIT Kharagpur. They have conclusively proven that the decline of the late Harappan civilization, the Harappan civilization itself has three phases: the early phase, the mature phase, and the late phase. The late phase is when everything starts declining. And they say that this timeline coincides with the disappearing of the Sarasvati River. We can discuss about this when we finish the talk because there's many points to cover. So I'll just leave it there, that this timeline of the disappearing of the Sarasvati River coincides with the decline of the Harappan civilization. Now, what does archaeology say about this? Because this is a lot of words, right? I can speak about it, make up my mind, but there should be evidence. And it turns out that there is evidence. So if you look here, this is a screenshot from one of the websites that ISRO has put up, where they have tracked the paleo channel, the so-called paleo channel, which is paleontology, is the study of extinct things. So paleo channel is the study of is a channel which of a river which is now extinct. The blue lines that you see is the channel channel of the now defunct Sarasvati River. And all these dots that you see that is clustered around the around the banks of this river, these are the Harappan sites. So some of it is in Pakistan today, and most of it is still in Haryana and Punjab, and all other places around Delhi and Gujarat. So the people who say, Indus Valley, there are sites along the Indus River as well, but I think given this in the light of this new evidence, which has already been established in the late 1990s and up until the 2010, we have to understand, we have to change the terminology that, we have to move from Indus Valley civilization to Indus Sarasvati civilization, because it is more than evident from this satellite mapping that all the sites that you find were primarily on the banks of the Sarasvati River. And later, because the Sarasvati River declined, people moved to other sites. And there is also some evidence to this. So this is some archaeological proof that, okay, the Sarasvati River existed and there were large concentrations of people and cities around the banks of this river. So that's all good and nice, but what does it have to do with us? Why is it related to us? So we call ourselves Sarasvats, right? Now, if we are Sarasvats, then what is the origin story for our community? Every community in India has an origin story. If you go to, I don't know, the Maheshwari community in Rajasthan, they have an origin story. If you go to the any community, they have origin stories, and there should be an origin story for the Sarasvats. And this is recorded in the Mahabharata, and especially in this chapter 50 of the Shalya Parva. And being आमची गेल जावन आम्ही पुरा वाजूकाची जल्लाल एक चॅप्टर आहे महाभारताचे मस्त कडेन सरस्वती रिव्हराचे मेन्शन आता जाल्यार शल्य पर्वांत विशेष जावन तांत एक कसला तीर्थयात्रा पर्व म्हणून एक अंतर भितवयले सब चॅप्टर्स तांतू बलरामाला तीर्थयात्रेक आसा तो महाभारत युद्धा टायमारी तो लढाई करना बिकॉज ही इज half minded ताका कौरवांगेल टीम वाचकी पांडवांगेल टीम वाचकी म्हण आसना कृष्णाला तो सांगता आमी कौरवांक सपोर्ट करता म्हण कृष्ण आयकना so he says that okay I will just go on a tirth yatra म्हण सांगता तो and this tirth yatra is along the banks of the Sarasvati river. This is something that we should study in depth because not just for the Sarasvats as a community but also to understand the Mahabharata war and the astronomy that is presented in this Tirthayatra Parva, you can use that astronomy to date exactly when the Mahabharata war took place. So, या टायमार आम्ही आता फेब्रुवारी आसाची पुष्य मासांत तागेले स्टार्ट जाता तीर्थयात्रा साधारण श्रावण म्हणटा तो म्हाका येता कुरुक्षेत्राक that is when he witnesses finally the battle between Duryodhana and Bhima. I don't know how many of you are familiar with this, but this is the backdrop of where we find the mention of Sarasvats. So Hantu, now there is a conversation between Janamejaya and Vaishampayana, where Vaishampayana is telling Janamejaya what are the sites that Balarama visits. And one of the sites that Balarama visits is the ashrama of Sarasvata Muni. And Sarasvata Muni is memorialized in this chapter by saying that, okay, Sarasvata Muni preserved the Vedas for 12 years when there was a drought. And Balarama visits this place and conducts charity, donates all this money to the people there, etc. And then he gets a question, okay, who is this Sarasvata? Why is he famous? And how did he preserve the Vedas for 12 years? And it turns out I've written these points, and the story goes, Dadichi is a very famous rishi. He's a Maharshi of immense capacity. तागेल तपस्वी पळोवन इंद्रा कितले मोठा भंय करता म्हळ्यार इंद्राला आशिल्लेच ना ताका भंय करता तपस पळोवन महर्षी ददीचेला तो कसो करता इंद्र तर म्हळ्यार ही सेंड्स एन अप्सरा डावन by the name of Alambusa to the banks of the Sarasvati river. आणि तिने न्हांवची पळोवन ददीची involuntarily discharges the semen into the river. And this is the river, the goddess Sarasvati keeps the semen in her womb, and there is a child that is born. And this child is presented to Dadichi, and Dadichi takes him on and calls him Sarasvata. And he already prophesizes that, okay, yo hod jata na, ek pati ammegel wachun asta, tadan ek 12 वर्ष पावस असताना. At that time, during this drought, this Sarasvata, this child will be responsible for the preservation of the Vedas. This is what Dadichi says, and he blesses Sarasvati. And then what happens? Everyone knows the story. So Indra, there is a very big war between the Asuras and the Devas. Indra needs a weapon, and Vajrayudha is basically Dadichi's rib cage and his spine, right? So Dadichi sacrifices his life, and Vajrayudha happens. And then there is a war between Devas and Asuras, where it is said that 99 Rakshasas are slain by Indra, and then there is the drought. And now during this drought, all the rishis around the Sarasvati river, they just flee from this place because there is no food. And Sarasvata also thinks of doing this. And at that time, he's only a boy. And he also thinks of leaving the banks of the Sarasvati river because there's no food. And to survive, you need food. Right? At this time, Sarasvati commands him to stay back and offers fish. Yeah, I'm like must hotly contested एक आमगेल कल्चर आनी तूं आमी झळकी खावची ब्राह्मण म्हूण सांगताचे झळकी खावची ब्राह्मण कसो लाय जाल्ले म्हळ्यार हांगा एक आमकां मेळटा ताजे एक कसो उल्लेख मेळटा शले पर्वाचे 37 म्हळ्यार 37th श्लोकांत सरस्वती देवी tav sonvat, and Sarasvata thinks of leaving the place, and then Devi Sarasvati stops him, saying that, okay, don't go from here. I will provide you food. I will provide you good fish from my waters, and that is going to be your food, but you should not leave this place, and you should continue the study of Vedas, म्हणून सांगतो. And then he just, amman सांगतर मागिरी कसले करू जायना म्हणून सांगता, तो कसं सांगतो, जायता, राबता म्हणून. He stays back, he continues the study of Vedas. And then when the drought ends, all the sages come back to this region and तांकां वेद पुरो विसरून आसता. 12 वर्ष तुम्ही खाण जेवण ना अशी खंयची वचून राबल्या म्हणारी. All kinds of knowledge gets lost. Right? So they come back, they find this one boy in the forest, constantly in the study of Vedas, and they look at him and they ask him, "Am kai shikai म्हणून सांग." And then he says, "Okay, I will teach you, but only if you become my disciples." तशें सांगता Saraswat म्हणून. And then everyone else is older than him. He is only a boy at this age. But ताका गोतस, वेद गोतस ताका. तो मात्र शिकता आशिल्लो त्या टायमार. Choice ना म्हणून सांगून तांणी पुरा तागेली शिष्य जाताची. And around, it is said, it is in the Shalya Parva itself, the same chapter, it is said that Saraswata Muni teaches 60,000 Brahmanas in his तागेल आश्रम अंतु एक 60,000 जनांक तो शिकयता वेद वापस. And then that revival happens, and then everybody continues to live their lives. Right? And this is the story that we find. And all of these people who have studied under Sarasvata and his lineage itself, तागेला personal life आज उल्लेख मेळना महाभारतांत. म्हळ्यार ताण वार्डे केल की तागेल चेडूं आसा की तागेल बायल आसा, त्या पुरो उल्लेख मेळना ह्या चॅप्टरांतू. But they are collectively called Sarasvats. So we come from that school of, what do you say, that is our lineage, that is our heritage basically. ओके जाल्लें, हें पुरो आमकां सादारण मटा गोतशील काणी. आमी एक केन्ची एक टायमार सरस्वती न्हंयची दडेर आशिल्लेची म्हणून आमकां गोतशील काणी पुरा जाणांक शिकून आशिल्लो. Then we talk also about migratory patterns. We know the stories of आमी सरस्वती न्हंयची बगलेर आशिल्ले, थंयतल्यान काश्मीराचे आमकां चिक्के जाण गुजराता मेळटाचे आमगेल्या सारस्वत, चिक्के जाण बिहारा मेळटाचे, चिक्के जाण वेस्ट बेंगॉला मेळटाचे, हांगा पुरो कशें आमकां आमी. We have this question, right? So, and आमगेल्या GSB म्हणटा, it stands for Gouda Deśa म्हणून एक जाग आशिल्लो. It is said, in oral traditions at least, we find that we moved from the banks of the Sarasvati river to what we call as Gouda Deśa, where apparently the production of good or God, God म्हणटा, that was famous. We know this story. This is very खंयचे चेडूं हांगा तुज्याली कुडले सांगताचे कान पडत्या देवस्थाना पुरो खेळतन की कोणे सांग आज्यान उलयतन की कळटा. गौडा देशा आशिल्ले, गौडा देशांतल्यान आमकां परशुरामान गोवा हाडल्या म्हणून एक आशिल्लें एक म्हणणी आमगेल्या समाजांत. जाल्यार हाका इज देर एनी अदर सपोर्टिंग एविडन्स दॅट वी फायंड? जाल्यार हांतू इतले पॉयंट हांतू I will only restrict the discussion around the topics of migrating from the banks of the Sarasvati river to the Gouda Deśa. Gouda Deśांतल्यान मागीर तो परशुराम आमकां हांगा हाडटा पळय गोमांतका हाडटा, त्या मेगे लागीं ह्या टॉकांत ना, because that will need me to finish the Sahyadri Khanda, which is an extensive work. 90 chapters असतात. तो खंडापटी हॉड आसा. आणि ऑनलायन we don't find any proper references to what is relevant for our community. So I have downloaded the copy of the Sahyadri Khanda. So probably when I finish it, I'll make another presentation. But Aji, I will only talk about what kind of references we find for our migrations from this river Sarasvati to Gouda Deśa. How did we arrive there? So now this is interesting. Yeah, I spent a significant amount of time actually looking for this, and this is already many years ago where I found it. Shatapatha Brahmana Maneka. So Brahmanas, if you look at the Vedas have 6 angas. There is the Samhita, there is the Brahmanas, Aranyakas, and so on, so on. So Brahmana is a Vedanga. It is the commentaries on the Sahitya, the Samhita of the Veda. So Tantu Bitari, there is a story of this king called Vidhega Mathavamana. So he is the founder of the Videha kingdom, that which continued to later, even to modern times, we found Videha kingdom. He is the founder of it. It is in modern day Bihar. Antu bitar tumge charri chapter antu first Brahmana 14th श्लोक tantu bitare kaani melta. हांतू ट्रान्सलिट्रेशन घाला संस्कृत घाली मस्त इट्स अ टर्स संस्कृत आणि ट्रान्सलेशन कसं येतं म्हणारी कारण अशी आमच्या गेल्यान सांगता बिकॉज दिस इज इझी टू अंडरस्टँड सो विदेगा द किंग विदेगा वॉज सरस्वती देडार आसता तागेल एकलो पुरोहित आसता तागेल नांव गौतम राहुगण म्हणून सांग दिस कॅरेक्टर इज ऑल्सो इम्पॉर्टंट कसं जात म्हळ्यार उलयता आसताच आमी खंय वचका म्हूण सांगून अँड द मोमेंट दे स्टार्ट डिस्कसिंग तागेल मात आयले कुठले विदेगाल मात आयले कुठले दॅट दे हॅव टू मूव अग्नि वैश्वानर म्हण एक इज अन अग्नि तागेल तोंडा बसता खंय विदेगाल अँड देन what happens is the Agni takes Videga and Videga follows the Agni. The Agni, he goes westwards and Videga follows him and Gautam also follows him. And what he said here is that the Agni incinerates everything in their way. So all the way up to a river called as Sadanira, which flows from the Himalayan mountains. And there the Agni stops. Vaishwana rapta kai thai. आणि तदन विदेग निंगीत काय तू हम कसला राबलो आमका या लँड तू आमका दिल्ले हाजे नंतर आम्ही राबची वांगा म्हणून सांग या अग्नी सेज येस ईस्ट ऑफ दिस लँड ईस्ट ऑफ दिस रिवर इज वेर यू शुड गो अँड स्टे अँड एव्हरीथिंग एल्स इज बिहाइंड यू has now been incinerated म्हणे मेळतो तुमका उल्लेख मेळता हांगा. So if you and this particular verse has been reinterpreted by many people, Western scholars primarily. Yeah, Kashi, this is probably the Aryanization of India. Western tribes came in. This is one of the references. We are literally burning the land, right? And the last sentence to Majilari, Brahmanas did not cross in former times. This river, Brahmanas did not cross in former times because Vaishwanara did not taste this land. This is one of the interesting bits you'll find because people say that this is how Aryanization happened. This is one of the theories. Anyway, there's no evidence to this. But what is interesting is two things here. So there's another interpretation which says that, okay, river Sarasvati is diminishing on the one hand, and people have to move away from this place. Where do you go? And Videga apparently went all the way to the west, where he found this river, right? It's even further than Ganga. And the name of the river is particularly interesting because it is called Sadanira. I will come to the Vyutpatti or the etymology of the word in the later slides. But this is one thing. And this Sadanira has been identified today as Karatoya River in Bangladesh by some scholars, and some other scholars identify the same river as the Gandaki River in Bihar. But regardless of this, both of these places, Bihar, West Bengal, are famous for one thing. They're famous for producing sugar, or they're also famous for producing what we call as God today. In fact, तुम्ही खंयची तुमगेल बेंगाली वेस्ट बेंगालांतल्यान कॉलीग आसल्यार फ्रेंड आसल्यार यू आस्क देम अबाउट नोलन गुड. Nolan Good is a why gotas na Nolan Good is a very sorry.
Yeah, take a bath.
Oops.
Later on, I'm listening to something.
Yeah. Okay. So Nolan Good is special variety of God that people in West Bengal have even today, and there are other. In fact, Bihar is one of the biggest states which produces sugar, etc. So there is some evidence that has stayed with us today that okay, this geographical region is probably where we moved to, and we find some references to it in the Shatapatha Brahmana. But is there any further indication about this place, right? So yeah, she can galla screenshot. As modern day ashitani karta tap karta ta ek palm tree asa. They tap the resin of the tree and they make the good. The very next shloka or the Brahmana in the Shatapatha Brahmana itself describes the geography of this place that they come to. Right? It says that it's earlier times there were no Brahmanas there. That is what it says, the last one that we just saw. And in this particular verse, they say that today there are Brahmanas to the east of this river, and it used to be very much uncultivated. It used to be very marshy. This is important, very marshy. And it was not tasted by Agni Vaishwanara. Agni Vaishwanara madare amtunka Bhagavad Gita ante melta. Vaishwanara is one of the primal forces. Aham Vaishwanaro bhutva pranayam deham ashita mun Bhagavad Gita ante Krishna sangwas. प्राणापान्यम पचामन्यम चतुर्वेदम म्हणून चित्रावद्दितने सांगताच आम्ही हा श्लोक साधारण. So Vaishvanara is the Agni that you consecrate to sort of civilize or to sort of purify or to sort of ahuti dittana kanche dava kami avyajna kartana. So very marshy is the word that they mention. And this very marshy, I picked it up. And this is, now I'm coming to speculation. There's no evidence to what I'm going to say next, or there's no supporting proof. This is a theory that I thought of. So I have to make that clear. So अशी गुगल अर्थ रचून पळयला आता मी very marshy म्हणलाका proof जावकाना that it is modern day Bihar/West Bengal म्हणून सांगून. तुम्ही बिहार तुम्ही if you study geography of India, there is this region called as Terai region. So West Bengal and West Bengal along with Bangladesh, it's on one side it is the sea, the Bay of Bengal. On the other side it is mountains, and the Madhya where the Ganga river sort of empties up into the sea. That region it's called the Terai region. This Terai region is extremely marshy. Even today, to me that Chamkalari, the larger greener part at the bottom of the screenshot that I've provided here, it is the Sundarbans. And Sundarbans is famous for being marshy wetlands. And a little bit towards the north of it is also very, very marshy. To me, Kolkata, if anyone has traveled there, Kolkata, the city itself is very marshy today. The construction projects for Karkala bhari kashta. It's one of the reasons why it has not developed further historically. So this is another sort of evidence that we find from geography of the place that, okay, it could be this place, Monsano. And this theory about Sadanira, right? So this is one thing that I want to mention here. Because Sarasvati was diminishing, and they wanted to move to another place, which was hitherto never heard of. They have not seen this place. It was not discovered. They had to literally go and settle there for the first time. So they found a river, right? And they have to now name the river. Obviously, now they come from a place where there is no water or diminishing resources of water. They find a very good river in the west of or the east of India, and they call it Sadanira. The scholar Sayanacharya mane Vijayanagara itlo scholar ashilo. That person provides the following vyutpatti. Vyutpatti is the etymology. Etymology more. It's slightly different than etymology. It is more like following the Ganaphatas of Ashtadhyayi. You give how a particular word can be generated. So he says, Atha eva sada sarvada niram dalasyam asti iti vyutpatya sada nira ityuchyate. What it means is, since this river is always full of water, it is called Sadanira. That is what it says. And this is my speculation that this particular migration, right, with Videga, Mathva, this already had happened when Sarasvati river was diminishing. And there is some modern geological studies that is done. There is a Nature paper in 2019 that is published. You can look it up, which proposes many theories, and they go back as back as 15,000 BP to actually support this, that the river might have had multiple disappearances and reappearances, etc. So this is something that I speculate. Yeah, तुमका last 3 slide दाखल पूरा विषय Miguel theory कोणी publication ना आजवेरी कसलय ना. So take it with a grain of salt. As a honest researcher, I have to declare that. Yeah, so let's move on. So now let us come to the genetic part of things. Itli veda mi ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ archaeology ullele, ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ tradition ullele, ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ Mahabharata ullele. This is all scriptures and speculation. Now let's talk about the hard evidences, right? 2015 antu ekla Maskaranas is a Goan Christian, and there is also on the same paper there is a Kashmiri Pandit Anupama Rana, who actually did this, and they I think it's university in California. I don't know exactly which university. You can look it up. I'll put all of this on my website or somewhere so that everything is visible. So they write a paper that examines the first founder family. So if you read the Sahyadri Khanda, Parashurama, when he comes back, I don't know how many of you know about the story. So Parashurama is sort of expelled from mainland India because he killed 22 families of Kshatriyas. He's expelled by Kashyapa, right? So Kashyapa, to atone for his sins, there is a yajna that he makes, and Kashyapa is the officiating priest. And at the end, Kashyapa asks for dana, dakshina, right? And Parashurama gives away all the land that he got, right? And then Kashyapa says, okay, you cannot live here now because it's my land. So Parashurama goes to Mahendragiri, which is in Gomantak. He throws the axe, and all of this is famous. And there is Goa that is created, Kerala that is created, and today even whatever we call, wherever we worship Nagas, right? All of this land was reclaimed by Parashurama. So, and once he settles there, he invites all the people from the entire country to come and settle there. One of the first people who enter there are the Lotli Pai people from the Kaundinya Gotra. This is again from the Sahyadri Khanda. I have not gone into that yet, but this is the story. So Sahyadri Khanda antu, first 10 families come from Trihotrapura in Bihar. From there, 10 families come down to Goa, and those are the so-called founding families of Amchigele in Goa. So this research only looks at their genetic material, and they try to see how much affinity or what is the genetic distance between the GSBs specifically and other castes. So they primarily compare us with the Hussaini Muslims and the Khatri family, Khatri clan in Punjab. So it turns out that we are actually our genetic distance between the Khatris is very, very small, and also with they go further back. They say that we share a lot of similarities between people of Western African origin and also Eastern Iran. Aji ami Zoroastrians or Iranians the Parsis. Basically, I'll come to that also in the next slide. So apparently, we share a lot of genetic similarity with them. And to get a little bit more technical, so the specific groups that they look at when they do these analysis, it's called a haplogroup. Haplogroup malari जीनाचे भाईचे एक section. And this specific to the GSBs, this is geographically restricted. तुमके मस्तकड़न मिलना India. So all these white dots that you see here, these belong to other people, right? And all the black dots and the gray dots, it is with the control group that they want to test compare us with, and the black dots is the geographically restricted haplotype that we have, which is very unique to the GSBs. And they find similarities with Western Afghanistani people or Iranian people. All is good. They propose a route that is sort of speculative, but at least evidence is that we are genetically similar to these people from Iran and Western Afghanistan or Northern Afghanistan. Now there is another person from our own community. Her name is Atma Anjali Pai. And now she heads the genetic research lab in one of the universities. Again, I do not remember which university she is in, but she is a PI today. And in her bachelor's dissertation, right, which she wrote in 2007, she shows a lot of great evidence. I think this is more important from the perspective of genetics than the earlier paper that I just showed you, which hypothesizes imaginary migratory routes, whatever. But Atma Pai, being from the community, knows a little bit more. So she actually did a very good job of actually going to different Sarasvat communities, not just the GSBs, different people. And she showed the following things, right? So first thing that she showed is the Sarasvat Brahmins all around the country, we are culturally isolated. And this you can see from the genetic material. What she says is the maternal variations that happen. So why the Gotra system developed, and I don't know, there's this theory, is, the gene is patrilinear. You can track the male side of the gene all the way back into antiquity, unless there is some extreme admixture of maternal admixture. If there is a lot of cross, how do I put it delicately? Intercaste ಪರಜತ್ತ ಪಡ. If that, unless that happens in large scale, you can reasonably track it back. So patrilinear antu tumgelia ಪಡ tum. So Ajey Pai shows in her paper that this is true, that this high degree of endogamous lineage is found in Sarasvat Brahmins, which is very, very different from other communities, despite other higher caste communities or other lower caste communities in India. That is the first thing that she concludes. And the second thing, what does this mean? This means that from the last 3,000, 4,000 years, our genetic material has undergone very little diversification. This is probably not a very good thing, from the point of view of science and health of the population. But anyway, it is what she found, that there is very little diversification in our genes, which means that we are very specific. We are a very specific group. And now there is an evidence that also supports our oral traditions, right? So we claim sisterhood to the Kashmiri Pandits. We claim sisterhood with I don't know, all the Sarasvat communities in Punjab and Gujarat and all the other places of India. And she tests it with two different Sarasvat family communities in Kashmir and also in Gujarat. And it turns out that there's a very specific haplotype, the J haplotype of GSBs. It is similar with them and no one else in the entire subcontinent. That's another interesting thing. And here comes the banger, I would say, is we are also very, very related to the Maharashtrian Parsis, who are not Hindus today, or they are not even Brahmins or whatever. They are Maharashtrian Parsis. They have their own story, story of arrival to India and all of this. But Parsis are Zoroastrians. They're also fire worshippers like us. And that religion is very, very similar to the Vedic religion. Apparently, we also have a very strong similarity with their genetic stuff. And we also share the most recent common ancestry. This is a term, in the next slide, I'll show you. This is a slide that the researchers use who do this kind of research. And there is very little genetic distance from our haplotypes with the haplotypes that you find in Maharashtrian Parsis. And here is what on the left, you see this, it's called a dendrogram, it's called a cladogram, in depending upon who you talk to. So the idea is, imagine that we are all descendants from a common root, right? And then later on we branch off into different communities, etc., etc. So what this analysis tells you is, okay, let's look at the most recent common ancestor. If you go back 3 generations, 4 generations, who was our most common ancestor? That is what it says. And here you see that the Maharashtrian Parsis, the MPA, and the Sarasvat Brahmins, we branched off quite recently, and that is why we see a lot of similarity between the two communities. And on the right hand, you see something, it's called a multidimensional scaling plot, or there are very simple methods to this. This is basically PCA, dimensional reduction, for those of you who are well versed with this kind of research. And here also you find that the Sarasvat Brahmins, and here what this clustering or what these dots mean is that if 2 dots are very close to each other, that means they're very likely similar. If they're far apart, that means they're very likely different. Here also we find that the Sarasvat Brahmins are closely related, genetically at least, with the Maharashtrian Parsis. So overall, this is what is there as of now, if you want to look at genetic research. Ajey Pai published another paper, which is not discussed here, afterwards, after some years, that also concludes similar stuff. And then in her paper, she also proposes a route, historic migratory pattern. Again, I'm sorry about the map, because I have to reproduce what is in the literature, and literature uses this map, unfortunately, and it takes out the Aksai-Chin and the POK stuff. So she proposes this route, and she uses the tradition, the genetic material that she analyzed, and the evidence that she found And this is the migratory route that she proposes. And these yellow lines, if you see clearly, this is later modern migrations to Karnataka, to Kerala, and other parts. But we started off on the rivers of the river Sarasvati. We went to the Gouda Deśa, which is this, Bihar and West Bengal. The Sadanira flows somewhere there, if you can see my mouse. And then we go to Madhya Pradesh, Gujarat. आमकां दोर्को म्हणून एक आडनाव आसा दोर्को. It was actually given to us by the Greeks. When we were in Gujarat, we were still, I mean, priesthood person, we were still merchants. We had already taken up the trading professions. And at that time, because we came in contact with a lot of Greek people, a lot of Roman people, etc., they named us Dorkos. आजी काय आम दोर्को म्हणून आमी सांगताच आमची घरांत मागोत ना मंगळुरान तू कारकळान पुरो वाडतना आयकून गोतस आतां ताजे सिग्निफिकन्स कळटा द हिस्ट्री बिहाइंड that term we understand today because it was a name that was given to us by the Greeks, someone who is in Dwarka. Dorko म्हणून someone who is from Dwarka. That is what it means. And from here also we come down to Goa at the invitation of Parashurama. And then after that, we know what happened, the Portuguese invasions and all the destructions of our temple. And we know all of that. And then we can discuss that in a separate presentation when I finish the Sahyadri Khanda, which is not, let's say it's a later addition to the Skanda Purana. Skanda Purana discusses the geography of India. And Sahyadri Khanda is one chapter, which is traditionally not accepted, but we still have it in the history. Anyway, so this is the proposed migration pattern that we had. And if you ask me what happened before this, before we came to the banks of the Sarasvati River, there is unfortunately no answer from me today. And with that, I would like to stop the talk. I think I took a fair amount of time, and I would like to move on to if any questions or any discussion points that you might have.